Baker Mayfield. He reminds me of a shorter version of Brett Favre. He can throw it. He's very confident. He's not afraid whatsoever.
Another guy that isn't getting nearly as much attention as I believe he should be is Florida international receiver T.Y. Hilton. 6 returns over his career, combining kick and punt returns for touchdowns.
He has the mindset, and he has the intelligence, and he understands the offense to a T. Kirk's our quarterback. We could have done a deal right then and got it for long term and been a slam dunk.
Sam is a good football player. The problem is he's not a great football player, and that's so we're bringing so much attention to a guy that, frankly, is a day 3 prospect.
And now, the Instinctive Scouting Podcast, featuring 2-time NFL General Manager Scot McCloughan and NFLDraftScout.com Senior Analyst Rob Rang.
Hi, and welcome to the Instinctive Scouting Podcast, starring 2-time NFL General Manager Scot McCloughan and myself, Rob Rang, Senior Analyst for NFLDraftScout.com. This week, we're taking a look at the Senior All-Star Game circuit, which started up this week in St. Petersburg and Pasadena with a couple of my favorites, the East-West Shrine Game and the NFL PA Collegiate Bowl. Yet another record-setting class of underclassmen making the jump to the NFL, our favorite new hires among the NFL coaching ranks, and of course, a preview of the conference championship games, mostly because my buddy Scot McCloughan is running 4-0 in the divisional round of the playoffs, and I want to kind of see if he can keep that hot streak up here as we move into the conference championship games. Now, before we talk about some of the players I've been told are turning heads at the East-West Shrine or the NFLPA, Scott, I wanted to try and give our listeners, give myself, just a little bit of perspective. You've been attending these All-Star games even longer than I have, which is saying something. I mean, I've been going to Mobile for the Senior Bowl since 2001. So do you have any examples of players in the past who really jumped out at you? I mean, any of the All-Star games, and perhaps maybe forced you to go back to the tape, or just any players that really are memorable over your long career in scouting prospects?
Yeah, you know what's unique about it is, of course, the Senior Bowl supposedly gets the best talent, which they do.
Yeah.
East-West is number 2,
Yep.
But then these other games, there's still players there. But the thing that's really cool about it is you do work all fall. And, you study Alabama's, you study Florida State's, and you see all the, supposedly top players. The thing that's great about the All-Star Game is you get to see them for 5 days in practice, and you get to interview them, and it's the small school guys. Leonard last year,
Yeah.
South Carolina State, the son of a gun, led the league in tackles this year.
Yeah.
And he showed up in the game too, big time, but the whole week he was balling.
Yeah.
And that's what's so cool about the All-Star games. It's not, you got a good feel about the big time guys. You got a good feel about who can and can't with the SEC, ACC, Big 12, Pac-10, whatever. But it's so cool to see the small school guys, how they show up and how they function against all that talent. And that's when all of a sudden you realize something like, wow, you know what? This guy, it's not too big for him, because especially the Senior Bowl, that's a big show.
Yeah.
Big show. You got NFL Network there, you got ESPN there, they're interviewing them, all the teams are interviewing them, and to see a guy that can show up day in and day out makes you feel better about his portfolio from the standpoint of drafting him.
That's a really good point. I mean, because that's exactly what I look at as well. Is that especially the small school players. If they can handle that transition, if they can show improvement throughout the week of practice, and not just have the stars in their eyes. There's unfortunately some of the players I've seen in the past. It was fairly clear that you would see players who just, like you said, the Ohio States, the Alabamas, the Florida States, the whatever, but they see those helmets and some guys just kind of fold. It's just too big for them. But when you see the small school players, or not even necessarily small school, not necessarily the FCSs, but the players who, perhaps aren't recognized as being the elite programs across the country, that really do step up when they have that opportunity. You get that apples to apples comparison. I think it's just so important to scouting. And so is there any players over the years? I mean, I'll give you one. I mean, just last year, I'm just going to you mentioned Darius Leonard, who had such an incredible Senior Bowl week, and then obviously had an even more impressive NFL rookie season with the Indianapolis Colts. But I'm going to go with the guy that you helped take number 1 overall in Baker Mayfield. And I don't necessarily mean this like as this is more kind of calling out myself, but it's the way I do the scouting process is, I don't get an opportunity to see quite as many of these quarterbacks in person, but when I do see them in person, I feel like I know the goods when I see the goods. And that's where Baker really impressed me, is by going to the Senior Bowl, and all the questions I had about his arm strength, he erased just by staying right next to Josh Allen, and we could see it. Snap after snap, the ball came out of his hand every bit as quick as it did Josh Allen. And maybe Josh Allen could throw the ball farther, but I don't care about far. I care about accurate. I care about velocity out of your hand. And so it was just, it's an example of a player just a year ago who definitely rose his stock, at least in my opinion, based on what I saw, because I could see them, again, standing side by side with other players. But I know you had a couple of other players that jumped out before with you also.
Back in the old school days when they had the blue-gray game, Curtis Martin.
Wow, yeah.
It was incredible. He was coming off a knee, and didn't play much of his senior year at all, and then showed up there. And when you go to practice, you watch players. It doesn't matter offense, defense, special teams, running backs, corners, safety. It doesn't matter. People stand out that are really talented.
Yeah.
And he was hands down the best player there, hands down. And he proves it out, big time.
Yeah. I mean, Hall of Fame running back, of course, was so great with the Patriots as well as the Jets. And yeah, I mean, those are, to me, are the best stories about this process, is that when you do see a player who maybe is coming off of injury, as you mentioned with Curtis Martin, or, again, coming from the small school. I mean, I'll give you one for me. The East-West Shrine game years ago, I used to, before it was in St. Petersburg, of course, it was in, I believe, in Houston and San Antonio. And then back in the old days when I used to really enjoy going to, was in San Francisco. It was just about an hour and a half flight for me from Seattle. It was great.
We're dating ourselves, just so you know.
We are. I'm getting grayer just having the conversation with you, Scott. But one of those players was a small school wide receiver, Jacoby Jones from Lane College, and it was like you said about Curtis Martin. I mean, he was the best player on the field, and it was so obvious. And Jacoby Jones, I mean, he wound up having a solid NFL career. I think I looked it up. I believe he scored 14 career touchdowns, but he did it over 7 NFL seasons. And coming from Lane College, that's saying something. I just, to me, those are kind of some of the stories that I think are why these senior all-star games are so important. And I would mention another one. I mean, it's kind of, again, you said dating ourselves. I mean, you mentioned the blue-gray game. I mean, I missed the blue-gray game. What an institution, what a classic that was. I mean, the holiday setting and all that, it was just great. But one of the other games I miss is the Hula Bowl. And maybe some of it's just because I'm selfish and would love to be in Hawaii when it's, cold and rainy here in the Seattle area, in mid-January. But I remember seeing Ellis Hobbs, the corner there, and same kind of thing. I mean, and that was one that, we had an opportunity. I remember you were scouting there. I remember, having conversations with Alonzo Highsmith and Jason Licht. I mean, there was a lot of young up-and-coming scouts there before they became big time. And so they were all nice enough to talk to me back in the day before they became so big time. But I just remember seeing Ellis Hobbs and just thinking, this is an Iowa State corner. Obviously, it was playing top competition previously, but still, when he went to the Hula Bowl and there was, maybe some other fringe prospects, the Ellis Hobbs wound up being a 3rd-round pick by the Patriots, and having a solid career as well. So I just remember thinking, wow, this guy is so much better than everybody else. And it is kind of cool to see a player kind of rise up and everybody basically come to a consensus like, okay, that's the top prospect out here playing this game. Is there any other players that kind of jump out at you, good or bad, throughout the all-star game settings that have surprised you?
Oh, yeah. I got hundreds of them, just so you know, but I'll just give you one or two.
Okay.
I'll never forget, I went to Birmingham, and it's a black all-star game. That's what they call it. And so we get to the practice field, and it's at a high school. Okay. And trucks had driven through it. There were so many divots in the ground that it wasn't safe to practice on.
Wow.
So they had to find another place. But Matthew Hatchett, Minnesota Viking.
Yeah.
Out of Grambling State. No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, not Grambling. He was out of he was out of
go.
Langston University.
Okay, yeah.
In Oklahoma, small school, and the thing is unique. He played in the league for a while, and then came back there as a coach.
Interesting.
Again, I'm aging myself because I scouted him, and then I talked to him when he was a coach about his players.
Wow.
Interesting. And the thing about it, the same game was Grady Jackson.
Really?
And you know what happened? He had no cleats, so he wore his boots like workman boots at practice.
Wow.
That's all he had.
Wow.
And he had a good NFL career.
He did.
He was he's a really good player. But things about that, it's like, the Senior Bowl is cool, East-West is cool, but the thing about it is the small school games, there's players there. They're all over the place.
Yeah.
All over the place. And it's, everybody says, well, Senior Bowl. Yeah, that's where the top players are at. I understand that. But there's still NFL players at all the All-Star games.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the reasons why I've really kind of, been sad to see some of these All-Star games. Like I said, the Blue-Gray game, the Hula Bowl, some of the historically black college All-Star games that they've had. Because as you've said, they are consistent producers of legitimate NFL talent. And so it's always fascinating to me when you do have these opportunities to see the players who impress, and who are just willing to ignore whatever distractions there might be. As you said with Grady Jackson, how easy would it have been for that young man at that point? Obviously, we know that he wound up being a very successful NFL player. But for him to go there and just instead say, you know what, I don't have my cleats, I'm not even going to try. Instead to show that toughness mentally, not before he could show the physical toughness, but that I'm going to give it my all. And if a player is impressive wearing, workman boots, as you said, steel toe boots, and he still shows light feet, well then that's pretty impressive. And I think that shows something about their resiliency. And I think that is so.
It's big time. The thing about it, Senior Bowl, a lot of players feel entitled. I'm here for a reason because I'm good and all that.
Yeah.
The smaller All-Star games, the lesser All-Star games, I guess I should say, they're fighting for their lives.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And that's cool. That's cool.
It is, because the cream's going to rise to the top, when you're playing like that. And so that's what I enjoy about it. So I'm happy you mentioned a couple of those players. Well, this year it's, I have to kind of protect my co-host here, Scott, because he's under contract with some teams. And so he's not going to be as, willing to share some information about perhaps some of the prospects that he's hearing. But if you've been listening to the ISP the entire time, that that pretty much what Scott's been saying this entire time has been right. He's been calling the Kyler Murray stuff. He's been, basically has called a lot of this stuff. And so I would encourage anybody to listen to some of our previous podcasts to hear some specifics on some players. But I'll just share a couple of players who I've been told that have been impressing so far in the Shrine Game practices and things of that nature. One of them would be the corner from Miami, Michael Jackson, which is not surprising to me, Scott. I mean, he's a player that I had previously given a draftable grade to. Thought that he was among the top senior corners in the country entering the year. And, Miami didn't have quite as good of a year as perhaps we would like. But I'm